Joining me live for the very first time is Melissa Jenkins. She's from the Cranston Action Network. Welcome to the coalition. And the question I have to ask you is, what's in the water in Cranston? Is it what people are just going nuts?
We are wondering that ourselves lately. Things have really gotten out of control in Cranston. And that's why we've come together as an action network to try to restore sane government to our city.
Tell us about the formation, how folks came together, and under what circumstances.
Well, the Cranston Action Network is a group that formed after the election. I think we all found ourselves going to larger groups like Resist Hate and Stronger Together, and groups that were politically active but not so much focused on local issues. And we felt that there were very pressing issues right in our own backyards that needed attention. And one of the first issues that came to our attention was this anti-panhandling ordinance, which they're thinly disguising as a road safety issue. We all know that this is about panhandling, and this is about discriminating against people who are visibly poor.
It's always code words, isn't it? We can never just come out and actually say what our real intentions are or what our real feelings are. We have to always, in case of these municipal witch hunts, engage in some sort of self-rationalization, self-justification, perhaps to protect oneself from realizing just how evil some of the unintended and intended side effects can be.
Right, but don't get me wrong, we're not in favor of panhandling. We don't want people to panhandle, but we want it to be unnecessary, not illegal. We want there to be a compassionate solution to homelessness so that people are not on our streets, people are not asking for money in traffic. We don't want that, but there are compassionate solutions that are ethical. And there are Mayor Fung's solutions which are not ethical, not compassionate, and not constitutional.
Right, because underlying all of this is protected speech.
Absolutely.
My fear is twofold in a situation like this. You've got a mayor who is part of a political party that advertised themselves as a party of liberty. And I'd like at this point in time in the conversation, this is my invitation personally to Mayor Fung and to the members of the Cranston City Council, that to read the Constitution. It's a wonderful document, and you'll find that there are a variety of amendments beyond the second. There's the First Amendment, freedom of speech, which is directly under attack here. There's the Fourth Amendment, illegal search and seizure, which is questionable in this situation and in so many situations across Rhode Island. Freedom to congregate. It's kind of a neat document, and my understanding is a lot of people have found wonderful ways to live their lives by embracing it. So my invitation, Mayor Fung, if you need a copy, I'm sure that I'd be happy to provide one for you. I'll drop it down to your office next week. But Cranston has got a history of this.
Right, and I think it's just making certain decisions at the wrong level. I think we all have to understand that the Constitution is the highest level of law. And then there are other federal laws. And then there are state regulations. And then municipal laws. There are certain things that you can do as a municipality and certain things that you can't do. There are certain problems that should be handled on the level of local towns and local cities. And then there are other problems that are not unique to that town or city that need to be handled on a comprehensive, at least statewide level. And homelessness and panhandling are among those issues. This is not in any way unique to Cranston. This is a problem throughout our state and throughout our country. And we need comprehensive and humane solutions that are going to solve the problem and not just sweep it over to the next town and pretend it doesn't exist. It's not an out of sight, out of mind kind of problem. We have to solve the root cause of homelessness, not punish people who end up caught in that situation.
Right, we've had a variety of speakers on the show in the last few weeks, and essentially what it boils down to is you're criminalizing human behavior.
Right. Not only are you criminalizing asking for help, you're criminalizing people who stop their cars to give money to the panhandler. It's against the law to be compassionate. It's criminalized to be a compassionate person. I break the law every single day in Cranston. Of course, now we have a temporary restraining order, so I can't be arrested for it. But they criminalized compassion.
And folks were actually arrested for this. This is not some logical extreme that we're talking about. People were actually arrested for engaging in acts of private charity.
Right, and you know what the fine is? It's $85.
Mhm.
If you're so poor that you need to panhandle, you don't have $85.
Right. And this is, again, someone that I admire a lot. If she's out there, if she's watching us tonight, or if she's watching in the future, Mama Dreads is I'll call her a street activist here in Providence. And maybe she didn't coin it, but she certainly brought it to my attention, the notion of a tax on the visibly poor. Because we all know that the next logical step after you criminalize behavior is that the state then gets up on its high horse, its high dudgeon, and then it tries to exact revenge on the individual by a civil fine or a criminal fine, and then becomes what potentially is a vicious cycle of enhanced criminality because of these folks' fundamental inability to pay said fines.
Right. I mean, what do you do if somebody can't pay the fine? You're going to throw them in jail?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then we're not going to be sued for thousands of dollars. We're going to be sued for millions of dollars. You can't throw people in jail for that.
Right. Now, and the notion that you actually engaged in arrests on this shows how completely out of touch they are with the notion of personal liberty. My fear, of course, as a civil libertarian or someone who subscribes to it, is that you are also going to put a damper on legitimate political expression.
That's absolutely true. And I think what they're saying is we're not restricting free speech. We're allowing you to do it in certain areas.
Right.
You can do it on this road, but not on that road. But they are restricting free speech because what they're saying is that you can't have the freedom to speak or to hold a sign or distribute a leaflet on the roads where people are. So the bigger roads, the wider roads,
mm-hmm.
the higher speed limit roads, that's where people are.
Mm-hmm.
If you restrict panhandling, leafletting, political signs, any other form of free speech on those roads, you're effectively eliminating the ability for those campaigns to be effective.
Right. And in the age of Trump, as I said on the Lively Experiment, I find that appalling because legitimate political expressions are not the whim of an individual leader on a highly localized level. It's just not. It's not his purview. It's not the city council's purview whatsoever at any level. And I also ascribe to the notion of civil disobedience. And civil disobedience, these are my words, is supposed to be annoying. Because if you're engaging in civil disobedience, you've gotten to a point where legitimate channels, as defined by the political apparatus today, are not working. You're not able to approach it. You've got a government completely out of touch, a government acting completely out of concert with the will of the people. Does any of this sound familiar? So by stepping this up, you are absolutely dampening the ability of the body politic to engage in legitimate, nonviolent civil disobedience and political protest.
Absolutely, and some of our members engaged in an act of civil disobedience. They were actually arrested for it, and the ACLU is taking their case and using it to argue this ordinance. And I thank the ACLU for their assistance in this issue. I know they spend a lot of time in Cranston defending people's civil rights, and I wish it weren't necessary, but we appreciate their help.
Well, and we regard Stephen Brown and the ACLU here on the coalition in nothing but the highest terms. We believe in civil disobedience. He's our hero of civil liberties. Remember, if the ACLU isn't at some point offending everybody, quite frankly, they're probably not doing their jobs. In a case like this, though, it was clear, and I want to speak to the political environment in Cranston. Any seasoned politician, any sentient human being understands, whether it be state versus religion, in the case of the prayer banner so many years ago, whether it be free speech issues, those are very well defined in law.
Right. And ordinances similar to this one have been struck down all over the country. At
great expense to the municipality.
Right.
And
we've just learned that our schools need $190 million in repairs, and we're wasting money on this lawsuit. Mayor Funk says now he's going all the way to the Supreme Court. On my tax dollar? No, thank you. I do not appreciate that at all.
Right.
I want my taxes to be going to schools, to be paying teachers, not private lawyers, to fight these cases. You know, there's just no reason to be fighting this battle at the municipal level in Cranston. This is not a Cranston problem. This is a statewide and a nationwide problem.
Has there been any attempt, at least within your experience, your knowledge, by the mayor to seek direction from the people on any of these issues?
I sat in 2 meetings, one at the Ordinance Committee and one at the City Council meeting. And Mayor Fung was at one of those meetings, but I saw dozens of people getting up and testifying against the ordinance, telling them, we don't want this, it goes against our beliefs, it violates my religious belief to not be able to give. And several constitutional lawyers stood up and said, this is unconstitutional. And they completely disregarded all of our input, all of our feedback.
Right.
They rolled their eyes.
Yeah, I've gotten that a few times from Rhode Island politicians. You know, I did a little back research, and folks, you can correct me if I'm wrong after the show. My understanding is that during the Great Cranston Prayer Banner debate, another issue that was settled constitutional law, that the city of Cranston ended up laying out somewhere in the neighborhood of $150,000 in legal fees when it predictably lost. Now he's arguing about it, taking this case to the Supreme Court. And we're not talking about the Rhode Island Supreme Court, we're talking about SCOTUS. We're talking about the big cheese, the Grand Fromage.
How much is that going to cost?
And where will the money come from?
How much money could we be giving to schools, you know, and giving to actual real solutions to homelessness and poverty that we're instead giving to lawyers? That is absolutely the wrong approach, and I really urge Mayor Fung to drop this battle. This is not worth fighting at the municipal level. That is not how I want my tax dollars to be spent. Not a single dollar more. Drop it.
We have a hashtag here, not 1 red cent.
Exactly, not 1 red cent.
Now, how many folks are in the Cranston, the network? How many folks have joined, or, you know, I know we've got a Facebook group.
We do have a Facebook group, Cranston Action Network. Please join.
Okay. And you've got several hundred members of that.
Right.
I was invited to join just the other day, and in reading through it, there's a degree of unanimity about this issue that you don't often see in Rhode Island politics. This is an issue that seems to resonate with folks who you would define as progressive, folks you would define as fairly conservative Democrats, and Republicans who still actually believe in the concept of liberty in the Constitution, of which I know many in Cranston who are, you know, off the record, who are embarrassed by this. I don't see, outside of really an established elite amongst Cranston politics, any real will for this to happen. Is there a motivation that you describe to this? Is he just naive and engaged in power mongering? Is there an economic interest behind this? What are your thoughts?
I think it's politically motivated. I think he's looking for support from right-wing groups to support his bid to be the governor of Rhode Island. And I certainly hope that people see through that. And the issues in Cranston are not just this. Our roads are in terrible shape. Our schools are in terrible shape. City Hall is a mess.
Right.
You know, we also have concerns about the level of diversity in hiring for city positions. There's such a low level of diversity in all of Cranston city government. You wonder how that cannot be deliberate.
Right. I mean, ultimately, the mayor has control over hiring and firing on all these appointed positions.
In the city with 23% minorities, we have 4% of city personnel who have minorities
and which is a gigantic signal to
what's wrong, what is going on there.
Right. My theory on this, and again, I'm very careful not to shall we say, imbue the guest with my theories. So I always make a point of delineating that. My theory, to be blunt, is that there are political contributions abound to be had from the Garden City business community, from the primarily affected retail communities who are looking to, as is in the case of Providence with a former mayor, to essentially control a retail environment and present sort of a white bread pretty picture to it, so is that folks who are coming to visit to spend money are not affronted with any of the harsh realities of real life here in Rhode Island. What does that mean in English? There's a certain segment of the retail community who's basically paying to play here and influencing city government in a way that's directly contrary to the interests of the people of Cranston and grotesquely anti-constitutional.
Well, I think all of the merchants and all of the retail businesses in Garden City that would not like to see panhandling in front of their stores should contribute to real efforts to stop homelessness.
Right.
You know, we need day programs. We have shelters that people are staying in. These are supposed to be temporary nightly shelters. People are staying there 2 and 3 years, and they get space available beds, so they don't even know from night to night if they have a place to sleep. At 6:30 in the morning, they leave Harrington Hall with a backpack on their back and all of their belongings inside, and they can't go back in until 6 or 7 p.m.
Right.
What are they supposed to do during the day? How about a day program? How about a work program? How about a job training program? How about some social services during the day? If all of those merchants instead put some money into a day program, the problem would also be solved, and that would be compassionate and constitutional. That would be wonderful.
Well, and my approach is to foster and I'm always careful when I use these words because these words have been hijacked in the state, a business environment where all can succeed. Now that, of course, is minus the cronyism that pervades the state, minus the multi-million-dollar giveaways to the favored few who, ironically, are often out of state and brought in to compete with established Rhode Island businesses. All that can be done, and it can be done simultaneously. There's really nothing holding government back from simply doing a better job, is there?
Right. There are compassionate ways to attack real problems. You know, in Hawaii, they've proposed a solution where we use Medicaid funds for housing because homelessness is a chronic medical problem. You know, it's a huge cost to the healthcare system for people to be homeless because they're at such great risk of disease and of dying. So instead of using Medicaid funds for emergency room treatments over and over again, we use Medicaid funds for housing. Senator Josh Miller has proposed that for Rhode Island, and I hope that he does follow through with introducing that and that we can enact that legislation, because that would be a real solution to homelessness, that people would get housing first and then the medical and social supports that they need to be functional members of society.
Now, there, as often is described, if you listen to hate radio and some of the outlets out there, you'll have people claiming that, and it's interesting because many of these people also ascribe to be small government, but at the same time, they're quite willing to ramp up yet another way to attack a problem for which laws already exist. So if someone's panhandling, there are ample laws in Cranston, and if they're panhandling in a matter that's aggressive, that's potentially injurious to someone, that's potentially life-threatening, aren't there plenty of laws on the books already to deal with those folks?
There are, yes, and there are also laws to deal with littering and with jaywalking, which are the other concerns that I hear a lot of people saying, you know, well, what if they come up to my car? Well, they're not going to attack you, they're just looking for money, you know, or something to eat, or a bottle of water. If you have one, give it to them. You know, if you don't, you know, talk with them, ask them what they need. Maybe you can bring it to them on your drive home tomorrow. They're not looking to attack you, they just want to survive themselves. There's no reason to be afraid of them.
It's interesting how as a society we create bogeymen. We take people, illegal aliens are often subject to the same word in their terminology. Folks who are here to the country who arrived at, let's say, in alternative ways. The irony in most of these situations, that first of all, Pew Research and a few other folks have done extensive studies of folks who are here illegally. The actual crime rate amongst those people is actually lower than the general population. Yet,
we don't say illegally, we say undocumented.
Undocumented. No, I'm using their words. Yet these people and their people are made out to be the bogeyman. If one of those folks, even though it may be a statistically sample that's irrelevant, engages in a crime, then that is used to blanket an entire population. That means all folks who are here must be guilty of the same thing, when in fact it's simply not true. The same thing is the case in panhandling. We're constantly treated to these notions that there's some mob out there engaged in, you know, using folks in the right out of bad English literature from the 17th century to, you know, training kids to be pickpocket. All these horrific notions are projected onto these people.
Right. Somebody actually said to me, what if they were on the sidewalk and your children were coming home? Wouldn't that frighten you? And I said, what if you were on the sidewalk? What if anyone was on the sidewalk?
Right.
They're not wild animals. They're just people who have lost their housing.
Yeah.
They're people.
Exactly. So where do things stand right now in terms of the temporary restraining order?
There's a temporary restraining order that prevents enforcement of the ordinance for now.
Right.
And that will be in place until the court case is heard, and hopefully we'll make that a permanent restraining order.
Right. Now, the city council, there's a dynamic there at work as well. We can't just point exclusively to Mayor Fung. There are other issues that are coming up. A city council run amok. As I called it in my post, stupid city council tricks. You've got now a proposed, or actually it's a ordinance that's passed, and it looks like it will be allowed to become law, because Mayor Fung doesn't seem to have the fiber to actually sign it to law. I guess my understanding, he's going to let it become law. That is going to prevent access to shorelines. Now, we can call it bridges, we can call it abutments, we can call it guardrails, we can call it anything we want. But a fundamental constitutional right in Rhode Island is the right to fish.
And this is another example. This is a statewide, protected in the state constitution,
right,
shoreline access and fishing rights. Those are not decisions that can be made at the municipal level. There are things that we can do at the municipal level. I understand that there have been neighborhood complaints about parking issues, about littering, about noise.
There goes that parking thing in Cranston again.
Those are all of the things, though, that a municipality can legally control.
Right.
And should legally control, is where people park, where they throw trash, how much noise they make, what hours they're allowed to make it. Those are things you can do with city laws.
Right.
Access to fishing and shorelines, you cannot do at the municipal level.
Right.
Please read the state constitution in addition to the United States Constitution.
Yeah, maybe we should have a little constitutional intervention.
You actually have to abide by that.
Yeah, maybe we should have a little intervention. Just
Really?
kind of lock everybody in a building and toss out copies of the Constitution.
We might have to read it to them.
Yeah, they're not allowed to leave until they actually pass a simple 10-part multiple choice test. For the record, on that issue, the Libertarian Party is announcing formally that there will be a fish-in that will take place, and we will be sponsored. I know Tony and I are actively searching on the Ron Popeil website so we can get our pocket fishermen. I don't fish. I'm going to learn to that day. The only thing holding off, our crack legal team is at work trying to figure out what day it effectively becomes the law of the land in Cranston, because within 3 to 4 days afterwards, we will be fishing there. And we challenge openly the law enforcement apparatus that is seemingly so aggressively controlled by the mayor to challenge us on that. Please, Now, we're smiling when we say this, because I don't think this is going to put me in any danger in being considered along the likes of, say, Mother Teresa or Gandhi, or sitting in the bus. But we're going to fish, because it's our right to, and for two reasons. Number one, we were born with those rights, those inalienable rights. Number two, it is critical to us as a body politic, as a citizenry, to establish that we understand our rights, and we will not allow them to be taken from us. Now, politically, I'm what you call a voluntarist, and regular listeners know what that means. A voluntarist is someone who believes that they were born as a free man or woman, and that they voluntarily consent to be governed, a consent that I feel I have the right to withdraw at any one time. So, for the record, in the city of Cranston, I am voluntarily removing my consent to be governed, and I'm going to go fishing if someone will teach me how. But we'll be there. And again, if it seems silly, it's not meant to be. Because as something as serious as folks who are brave enough to protest, and I say brave because, it's intimidating. It's very easy to sit behind a computer keyboard, or it's very easy to sit behind a microphone and blast away at these things. Excuse my language, but it takes balls, it takes stones to go out there and actually become a street activist, to put yourself at risk, because law enforcement in this state has so many different ways that, quite bluntly, they can screw with you. And once you enter their system, who knows, right? And there's all sorts of things that can roll from there. But the point being is that what I admire about what you're doing at Cranston, we have another hashtag here we call it "Take It Personally." You have a saying on your Facebook, it's something to the effect of what happens when good people are silent on your Facebook page.
All that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. So we believe that we are the good people who cannot sit by and do nothing as we see our city being run into the ground.
Right.
These are not our beliefs.
And there's
we don't support this, and there's strength in numbers. I think it's given us a lot of courage to be civilly disobedient and to oppose, to speak out against these ordinances at city council meetings, and to come together as a coalition because we have each other and we know that we're not alone. I think a lot of people, back when the school prayer banner was an issue, a lot of people in the community felt that they were alone. And if they didn't support the city's view that it was okay to have a Christian prayer banner in a public school, that they would somehow be ostracized,
right,
as Jessica Alquist was.
Right.
People were afraid to speak up. And what I'd like everybody in Cranston to know is that you cannot be afraid to speak up.
Right. No.
You are not alone. Come to the Cranston Action Network. We're going to speak up right along with you.
Excellent. And of course, this is the beauty of social media. When there are events that happen in I'll call it the early days of social media, whether it be 38 Studios, the prayer banner, where folks, as you pointed out, didn't come together because they didn't know how to. We all live in our little suburban paradise, some of us. We all live, lives of quiet desperation. We're all, so many of us, 2-income families, 3 and 4 job families, trying to hold it together amongst all these different forces, whether it be college costs, medical costs, all these different things.
We designate these people to represent our views. Our city council and our mayor are supposed to be representing us in governing our city. And they are not representing us in governing our city. They are not listening to us. They are not endorsing our values or our points of view at all.
Are they emboldened by this single-party control of Cranston City Council in the town government?
It certainly seems that way.
Do you find irony that the constant complaint of the Republican Party in this state is that, after 70 years of Democratic leadership, we need a 2-party rule, and yet given the opportunity to do the right thing, once they're handed the keys to the kingdom, as it were, in Cranston, that they just run off and do some of the same excesses?
Well, I think it's a myth that we have a one-party system in Rhode Island. Within the Democratic Party, there are at least 3 separate parties.
No,
so it's not one party at all.
I'll agree with you on that. But Republican, and this is what I find astonishing at this point, 8 months, 6 months, whatever, into the age of Trump. There is a constant rationalization every time they engage in this type of egregious behavior that so-and-so would have done it, or they would have done it, or somebody else did it.
We've always done it.
Right. That's
I love that one.
Right. Yet, in the run-up to the election, wasn't their claim that they were going to be better? As a state, as a community, aren't we looking for people to help us rise above that level of mediocrity that's been so pervasive for so long?
Right. That's exactly what we're looking for. I think we're looking for people who represent our values too and move the city forward in a way that makes it a place that we want to live.
Trying to chase out the homeless is not going to fix the problem, is it?
Absolutely not. How does that solve anything? If they go a mile down the road to Warwick or Providence? Or maybe they just start criminalizing poverty there too. Either way, it doesn't solve the problem at all.
Here in Providence,
and there are compassionate solutions that we could accomplish with the same money that we're paying to lawyers.
And folks have to go somewhere. We can't will it out of existence.
Right.
There are fundamental economic, social, medical, behavioral, psychological issues on individual levels, because these are individual people that we're talking about, that need to be addressed if we're going to move forward as a society. I'm not a collectivist by any means, but at the same time, we simply can't ignore the problem and hope it goes away.
Absolutely not. Anyone who has found themselves in that dire situation has been punished more than enough. The last thing they need is to be fined.
Right. by engaging in it. And folks, if for anyone who doesn't believe in the slippery slope argument, I just want to point out that we focused on this on the show just a few weeks ago. A couple of years ago, the government decided that they were going to create a database of prescription medicine, that there would be a listing of who was getting what from which doctors, all in the interest of the public good, in the interest of safety, in the interest of law enforcement, in the interest of community. For everyone who doesn't believe, whether it be criminalizing being part of the visibly poor, or perhaps on a legitimate medical basis taking prescription medicine to help you with a medical issue, the state decided to pass a law that took that database and created the right for the government to engage in warrantless searches. Now, as a civil libertarian, that's appalling.
I'm concerned about that. The opioid epidemic is horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And I do understand the feeling of the government of wanting to do anything that they can to
Mm-hmm.
stop that. When you hear about the number of people who have died,
Right.
like 1,000 Rhode Islanders
Right.
have died
But how much of that is
from this.
under
And
the-
so I do understand that kind of extreme thinking, but to violate everybody's privacy for that is a very extreme sacrifice.
Right, and that's
in this
the
world.
government, as they say, never letting a good crisis go to waste. Extend your power, extend your intrusion into people's personal lives, all under the guise of the same notion that we're talking about with people in the streets, public safety.
Right.
We invade people's
And
privacy.
what else do we do? Is there a way that we can attack this problem without invading
Right.
people's privacy? And certainly there are ways.
Right, and there were, in all of these cases, whether it be the First Amendment to the American Constitution, whether it be the laws creating the prescription medical database, whether it be the Constitution of Rhode Island with regard to fishing, there were laws and rights in place to prevent this type of abuse from happening. And yet, these elected officials, who we elect, by the way, I mean, Cranston, I gotta say, in one sense, I'm teasing him a little bit, but you guys kind of did this to yourselves. You guys voted for the guy overwhelmingly, my understanding, re-elected a guy who's clearly had a history with the police department, well documented.
I am duly embarrassed for my city. I am.
And what's up with this guy who's city council chair? I mean, the bravado. I mean, he's literally out there sticking a stick in the eye of anyone who opposes him.
Right. Oh, I was gavelled. I was silenced in a city council meeting when I attempted to speak about transparency in government. He didn't want to hear what I had to say and gavelled me. And I was not allowed to speak until the end of the meeting when pretty much everybody in the room had
Right.
gone home.
Right.
So much for transparency. I
Right.
wrote about it in the Cranston Herald, so you can Google that if you're interested in hearing my response.
And what's interesting, in Cumberland, they've actually changed the format of the town council meeting so that there's an open session for individuals at the beginning and the end of the meeting, which is, to me, I don't have as much experience at the town council level as I should, because clearly, as we're finding in Rhode Island, whether it be Smithfield, Cranston, Providence, in the halls of justice, justice is in fact in the halls of city council meetings. This is where your lives, by the way, if you're looking to become a political activist and make changes, running for city council, boards of education, water boards, things like that, is the first and most basic and most primal step in democracy. Your lives and the lives of your community are far more affected by a mayor, a city council chair who's out of control, as you can see, than very often what's going on in Washington or anywhere else. Which is why I applaud what you're doing, because you know, if they won't listen, you have to inject yourself, sometimes forcibly, into the conversation.
Yeah, I think what we've learned throughout this process is that the small issues really are the big issues. You know, we had a little issue with a small local park, Doric Park.
Right, talk to us about that.
So Doric Park, there was a backroom deal. Mayor Fung crafted this deal with a private Massachusetts-based soccer league to grant them preferential access to Doric Park. And this was all hush-hush. We were not allowed to know any of the details until shortly before the public announcement, when it was presented at a public meeting, but nobody was there and nobody was aware it was happening, and we couldn't get any details about what was going on. So I asked our city council president, Michael Farina, what was going on with the deal. And he told me blatantly and publicly on Facebook, there is no deal, no plan whatsoever. But I subsequently got very specific information from another member of the city council that there had been a deal crafted, and he gave me some details of that deal, and I made them public. We made them public at the Cranston Action Network. And we were able to activate a community to go canvass the neighborhood. None of the abutters, the neighbors abutting the park, had any idea any of this was going on. And they were talking about increased parking, increased lighting, you know, bringing thousands of out-of-state players in for tournaments, and taking the park access away from the neighborhood who uses it well. You know, there are pickup leagues and basketball courts. The neighborhood is using this park in the most wonderful way. You know, we went down and had a celebratory picnic there, and we saw all kinds of people using the playground, using the basketball courts, walking on the track around the outside, which would have been demolished to build parking lots.
And by the way, this is a park that you all paid for.
Right, this is a public park, and one of the few public open spaces that we have in Cranston.
Right.
You know, we're not big on recreation in Cranston. We don't have a lot of parks. We have exactly 1 mile of paved separated bike lane, 1 mile in the whole city.
So once I'll call it the fiction behind the whole agreement was brought to light, what was the mayor's reaction?
He said, oh, this is standard operating procedure. We have to keep these deals quiet until the deal is done, and then we'll properly vet it. So you're not allowed to know about it until we've already decided on the details and pushed it through the city council.
Because we know better than you.
Right. Once it was crafted, you know that was going right through the city council.
Right.
So the only way that we were able to stop Doric Park from being sold to a private Massachusetts soccer league was through community action. And community action, collective action works.
As I remember, the story broke to the rest of the state, and within 48 to 72 hours after, at least from a public perception, after you folks made it known and essentially got right up into the grill of city government, there was a hasty retreat.
Yeah, absolutely. But he actually said at the press conference at Doric Park that other public spaces are also up for grabs. So everybody remain vigilant. You know, they're going to try to keep it a secret, but you need to have your eyes open and watch for these deals.
Right.
They'll be coming.
And this is, you know, in one sense, it's a shame that an organization like the network has to exist, because one would hope that a city councilman or woman would be intimately involved in the community, would have a real feel for community attitudes, would actively go out and, you know, if something of that nature that's serious is being considered, would actively go out and poll people for their opinions. And when I say poll, I don't mean opinion polls. I mean, go out, knock on a few doors, go to have it sponsor some, some neighborhood coffees.
Just have a neighborhood meeting.
Have a picnic. You know, spend some of that. What was it? The city council chair got $1,000 on the from a retail vendor on the on that. Band there, yeah. How about that? Maybe spend $1,000 on that money having a picnic over at Doric Park and say, hey, you know, or maybe just, I know it's a little crazy here, get a little wild. It's Friday night. Hang out at the park just quietly for a couple of days on a weekend.
Right, and watch how it's being used, because you would never touch that park if you hung out there on a Saturday afternoon.
Right.
Never.
I mean, public assets are not up for open auction.
No. Public parks or for public use.
Right.
You know, that's what they're there for. That's what we're paying for.
So, folks need to be proactive.
Absolutely. I think we need to be especially vigilant in Cranston right now.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Right. Because the mayor is going to run for governor. That's fairly obvious. Do you think he'd win Cranston at this point?
I would hope not.
Interesting. But I would have thought that after the police scandal.
I would agree with you there. I would have thought that as well. People seem to overlook that.
Right, and if anyone hasn't read the report, I believe it's still, just by coincidence, it's still linked to the front page at coalitionradio.us. You can click on a link and read the whole thing. Timely, it's just been kind of sitting there by accident for quite a while. Some things were meant to be.
I mean, just the sheer number of lawsuits that come through, not only the police department, the fire department, you know, the ACLU is always suing us. We're constantly being sued. And they don't care. It's not their money. It's our money.
Right.
So we care.
Right. No, that's not, it's damned obvious you care, and again, I applaud your efforts. I'm going to ask John Patrick Donegan to join us in a second. First of all, I hope you'll keep us on your press release list and keep us aware of what's going on.
Absolutely. And come see us when you come down to fish.
Yeah.
We'd love an invitation.
Oh no, you guys are welcome.
We probably have some fisher people in our group.
We're gonna announce it. It's gonna be we're gonna have it'll be in a sense, I say loosely sponsored by the Libertarian Party. Maybe we'll have some soggies and yacht club soda and some weenies, and it'll be a good time. It'll be a party.
Sounds fantastic.
And people can take pictures of me, the kid from Jersey, trying to fish. Yeah, okay. But I mean, but it should be, and what I appreciate after having chatted with a number of you folks, and this is actually true of all of the variety of groups in Rhode Island who are sort of in uprising right now. I spent a lot of time with the folks in Burwell. Trying to spend time with folks in Cranston. People in Providence this week. And by the way, if you haven't seen, there's an event this week in Providence for the no LNG facility. We'll share that on our Facebook page. You need to be made aware of that and the implication that has for the folks on the south and west end of Providence.
Edgewood, where I live, is also south Providence, so
right.
We're very concerned about that facility. It's a mile from my house.
Okay.
And they had 2 accidents already this year.
Right.
You know, we can't have that.
You close an interstate highway and tells you something's wrong. But the key here is that while these may be very different problems and they may be germane to individual locales, it's the attitude pervasive in Rhode Island government, whether it be folks at the state level just ignoring the concerns of the people of Bravo, whether it be this complete grotesque ignorance of our state and our federal constitution at the town council level. It's all a function of the same type of arrogance.
Right, and the people of Burrillville have spoken out
Yeah.
completely in opposition to that power plant.
Their
city government and our state government needs to listen to them.
Right, and quickly, because this cultural, political arrogance, as I'll call it, that is pervasive in this state, is not working on a number of levels. The state is not a better place to live for all of their leadership, and they've had ample time, all of these folks, to perform. And on top of that, you are stepping on the neck of the individual rights of people of a variety of economic, racial, religious. The only thing that's universal is the willingness of folks in government in this state to ignore the rights of the individual. It's disgusting and it's got to stop. So you guys are my hero this week. Just don't change a thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.